In today's video, I'll be sharing with you 6 tips for attaining that graceful mohair halo on a budget. So if you're ready for some floofy fodder, grab something cozy to drink and let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Wool Needles Hands Midweek Ramble. My name is Taylor and I will be your host, and I am super excited for today's video because today we are unpacking ways that you can achieve a really pretty delicate halo without having to break the bank. And at the very end of the episode, I'm actually going to be sharing with you 5 budget-friendly options for that 70-30 mohair silk blend that we all want to pair with our yarns for those really pretty hairy projects. Now, I've done a lot of research for this subject, and I can tell you right now that even though I've done that research, I am no expert on mohair. However, the research that I've done here is actually coming from the perspective and POV of a yarn consumer. So these are tips that I have gathered and gleaned from various different resources that as a consumer, I find to be very helpful. And just like any, smart shopper right now, especially with the economy being the way that it is, depending on where you are, we are trying to save some money when we're purchasing things to fuel our hobby, if you will. And in the context of today's video, with purchasing that mohair floof that we really want to pair with our projects. Okay, because this video is going to encapsulate many different options for purchasing floofy yarn on a budget, there are going to be mentions of synthetic fibers here. If you are a viewer who prefer to use synthetic fibers, can only use synthetic fibers, or you really just can only budget for synthetic fibers right now, that is totally okay. And if you read the comments below this video and you happen to stumble across a comment that makes you feel sort of crummy about choosing to use those yarns, let me be the first to tell you, just disregard it. If it's right for you, if it brings you joy, and it means that knitting is possible for you, ignore those negative comments because they just don't apply to you. Okay, without further ado, let's dive right in. All right, the point of all of this, and I know I said let's dive right in, and that's actually what we're doing right now. But the point of all of this, it seems like there's a collective kind of movement, and it's been happening over the last several years to get that really lovely mohair floofy halo in our garments. People seem to love the look of a little hairiness in their clothes that they knit. And that's totally a preferential thing. I mean, there are lots of folks out there that don't like that at all. And if you are one of those folks, I get it. I totally hear you. There are just, design elements or fabric features that we just don't love, and that's fine. I still want you to stay and listen because you might find something here that catches your attention, but I totally get it. I hear you. I get it. But the thing that people are trying to strive for, I think, in my opinion, based on my own preferences, is that halo. And I happen to be wearing a sweater today that features a little bit of a halo. Now, I would go so far as to say that even though I used mohair as part of the fabric for this and I paired it with another yarn, mohair, the halo provided by the mohair is actually not even what's giving this particular garment that halo. There's halo coming from the other yarn that I'm using here as well, which is Icelandic wool, which is a product of Istex Lopi Icelandic wool yarn. And I'm going to talk about that. But the point of bringing that up is that this garment has a halo. If I get closer to the camera, you can see that it's really hairy with a nice halo that kind of mutes down the stitch definition. And in some cases that might be seen as a negative thing, but some folks really love that. They love the way that it kind of softens everything. I have another piece right here that I just finished. This is the Hipster hat by Petite Knit, and that halo is really out there. Like, you can really see that lovely soft halo. So when we talk about halo, that's what we're referring to, this fuzz that you see here. It's just, it's a fancy way of saying the fuzz that you get in a fabric that's knit with a hairy fiber. Another option that I have to share with you is this one here. This is my Magnolia Bloom pullover by Camilla Vad. This is knit with Surrey Alpaca. This is brushed Surrey Alpaca, which is another floofy yarn that provides you with a really lovely halo. The halo of this, even though this yarn does have a silk core, the halo is much less shiny. It's much more matte. There's not as much of a luster, and that's just the nature of alpaca fiber. This, to me, is soft in the buttery sense than mohair is. Mohair is definitely soft and supple. This is more supple in my opinion, and I'm going to talk more about this as an option. I just wanted to show you what I'm referring to when I say halo, and that is what we're talking about here. It's that brushed, fuzzy, fibery look, and I know how to fold sweaters. Okay, so I'm going to set this down. Now that we've kind of established what it is that we're referring to when we say halo. Let's talk about some ways that we can achieve that may or may not include really pricey mohair yarn. Okay, the first place I want you to consider looking, and if you're on a really tight budget, or if you cannot use animal fiber, or you have a real strong sensitivity to hairy yarns, the first place I would consider checking are synthetic fibers. In this case, brushed synthetic fibers, brushed acrylic, or recycled polyester yarns. Recycled polyester yarns tend to have a hairy look about them. They kind of replicate like a more hairy Norwegian wool, albeit it's 100% recycled polyester. And then you have other just brushed polyester fibers as well. So I have a couple examples that I want to share with you here in my actual possession. The first one being something that I discovered at Joann yesterday. I take that back. I discovered it a while ago, but I picked it up from Joann for the sake of this video yesterday. And this is big time budget option. You can get this for less than $5 a skein, and most of the time it's even less than $4. It's by Red Heart. It's called Super Saver Brushed. And this is 100% brushed acrylic, and it's put up in 253 yards. 141 grams, and it is a worsted weight yarn. Now, when you're using mohair to achieve that really floofy halo on most of the patterns that you see that are really popular right now, you're pairing a lace weight strand of mohair with a heavier weight base yarn. So you're really having to purchase two different types of yarn to create that project, which is really going to break the bank depending on the kind of yarn that you're choosing. For the sake of a yarn like this is already a worsted weight yarn, so there's really no pairing necessary. And because it's brushed, you're going to get that halo that would be kind of created from a mohair yarn otherwise. So here's what it looks like. I have used some of it. I cranked out a hat on my Centro knitting machine that I talked about in a few videos ago. But I did that because I wanted to show you the fabric. But here is the yarn. So this is the label. This is Red Heart Super Saver Brushed. It's 100% brushed acrylic, and it has a really soft, delicate halo. Now, here's what I'm going to say about this. Sometimes acrylic has a luster to it that I think is what people tend to refer to when they say it looks plasticky. I personally think polyester has more of that shine. Acrylic to me tends to be a little bit more matte than polyester, which is I think why it's used as a synthetic version of wool, because it's really good at kind of replicating that wool look. This, the brushed nature of this really does give it a pretty satisfactory halo for the money that you're spending here. I think that there is going to be a likelihood that there's some pilling that's going to happen with this. So I will say that, because acrylic does have a tendency to pill. Acrylic and merino, to be honest, and cashmere, they pill at about the same rate. I would say that acrylic just continues to pill. You get bigger pills and it becomes a little bit more noticeable, where cashmere, the pills are kind of limited in size, and you can brush them away and then it looks new again. Acrylic's not quite as resilient as like a cashmere or a merino. I mean, obviously, because it's a synthetic fiber, so you just don't have that natural ability to pull itself back together. However, for the money, for the yardage, if you're on a really tight budget or you can't use animal fiber, this is a really beautiful option. So I'm going to show it to you one more time, get a look at that halo, and then I'm going to show you this hat that I cranked out on the Centro knitting machine. I did not knit this by hand, using that yarn. So this is the hat. I'm going to get in here on the fabric, and you can see that it does have a really nice, delicate halo. Really pretty. And the range of colors that are available in this yarn are really nice. I'll pop a little video up here. I snapped a video while I was at Joann to show just the color selection that was available at my Joann. I'm not sponsored by Joann or Red Heart or anything like that, but I'm just showing what was available, and they're really pretty delicate colors. So yeah, so this is what the fabric would look like. Knit up. Nice and delicate and soft. It's really, really soft yarn. And if you want something brushed with a really nice halo, this is a good option on a really good budget. Okay, while we're on the subject of synthetic fibers, I also discovered that Lion Brand has re-released its Jiffy line. This is a line of bulky weight yarn that is 100% acrylic, and it is also brushed. This, it's heavier than the Red Heart that I just showed you, but it is definitely brushed, and it's really matte. And it's picking up lots of little random flex of things here. This, I think if it had to replicate something, this replicates more of a Surrey alpaca than it does a mohair, because it's really matte. And to me, the floof that I'm seeing here, it kind of looks a little bit more like matting. I don't love it. I mean, it's an available option here. It's not my favorite of the ones that are available, but I will tell you that this is 681 yards of bulky weight yarn. And I got this for $9.99 and it was 25% off at Joann. And that's a really good deal. So if you're trying to knit up something that has like that nice elegant floof for a child, or for yourself if you're on a really tight budget, or for a friend who's maybe a little bit less discerning about the type of floof, this would be a good option. But in terms of, you know, budget friendly acrylic floof, I have to say that the Super Saver brush really kind of wins in my mind, because I feel like it has a more natural floof than the Jiffy. Yeah, I'm not too keen on that. But it is an option. It's available to you. And then the other option for synthetic fibers with a little bit of floof is another one by Lion Brand. They seem to be putting out the fuzzy stuff lately, but this is by Lion Brand. It's called Respun. It's 100% recycled polyester. And you can see that it has that hairiness. There's a fuzz going on there. And that's polyester. Polyester has a tendency to have kind of a fuzzy look to it. And if you wanted to replicate something with a little bit of a halo, this would be an option for you as well. And this particular line of Lion Brand yarn, this is relatively new to me. It's made with 100% recycled polyester. So it says this yarn is made from recycled plastic, keeping bottles and other waste out of our oceans and landfills, which you can't, that's awesome. But they have a lot of really cool colors for this particular line of yarn. So lots of fun, you know, options for you if you want something that gives you a little bit of that halo, but you need something synthetic. Now, let's say you want the good stuff and you don't want to pay full price. The best way to have that is like anything else, is to get it secondhand, whether that be from thrift stores, charity shops, maybe you're purchasing it secondhand on Facebook Marketplace. Secondhand is a really great way to go if you want the actual yarn that you're seeing in the pattern and you don't want to pay full price. Now, if you have a pattern in mind, this might be a shot in the dark, but you might get lucky. So it's kind of fun to see what you can find. Here are some tips on how to find really good secondhand yarn online. What you want to remember is to use the word de-stash when you search. I find, as I've been kind of playing around seeing how to find secondhand yarn online, that using the word de-stash is going to help you find folks who are really trying to get rid of yarn. Some of those folks are going to be offering the yarn at really close to market value, but some of them are really trying to just get their stash down, and they're going to reduce the price quite a bit. So I'm going to show you how you can search this using Etsy as an example. I'm going to open up my Etsy app and I'm going to record my screen so that you can see what I'm seeing here. Now I'm going to try two different searches. The first search, I'm going to type in de-stash yarn, just de-stash yarn. And you can see that here it gives me de-stash yarn lot, or de-stash yarn sale. De-stash yarn lot means the person is selling you a group of yarn for one price. I'm going to stick with de-stash yarn first. We're going to see what we can find. Now, searching through here, these are folks that are trying to get rid of yarn from their stash, and that comes in all shapes and sizes and varieties. For the case of this video, we're looking for mohair, and I feel like if we keep scrolling, it's going to take us some time to really find what we're looking for here. I did pass a couple of mohair options, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add up into the search de-stash yarn mohair. Okay, we're getting closer. So we have here somebody de-stashing 2 skeins of Woolberry mohair lace, 2 skeins for $40, something that's hand dyed by an indie dyer. That's a really great bargain. So that's a great option. We can keep scrolling and you can see that there's people selling mohair yarn here. Here we have, I'm not sure what this is. It looks like they're selling 1,093 yards of mohair yarn, and it looks like this particular listing are for 125 gram skeins, 70% Kid Mohair, 30% silk, which is that kind of sweet spot in terms of mohair silk yarns. And they are selling each one of those for $32, which is a steal. And she's low in stock, which makes a lot of sense. So as you can see here, this is a way to find inexpensive mohair yarn secondhand, which is always thrifty and really good for just pinching pennies. And you know you're getting that quality product that you're looking for and seeing in all of those gorgeous patterns. However, when you have a particular pattern in mind, like I said, this could be a little bit of a shot in the dark, but it is absolutely worth a shot. Okay, another way to save some money on mohair, and this goes for any yarn in general, is to purchase it in bulk. And when I say bulk, I mean trying to find it offered to you in cones. Now this is a cone of undyed mohair that I have for my business. It's a large quantity of yarn that has not been processed into skeins, and because that additional processing has not happened, those savings are being passed down to you in the form of a reduced price on that particular yarn. Now, it's not always the easiest to find coned yarn, but a really quick Google search will help you with that. Just simply go to Google and type in mohair silk yarn on a cone, and I promise you, you're going to find some options of places where you can purchase coned mohair yarn. Another great way to get that really pretty halo on your projects is to just move away from mohair in general and start looking into brushed Surrey alpaca. Now, you've seen people use it before. You may not know exactly what it was that they were using, but you've seen people use that really lovely, delicate, matte, floofy yarn, and they call it Surrey. What they're referring to by that is Surrey silk yarn. It comes in skeins very similar to mohair, and at first quick glance, you might actually think you're looking at a mohair yarn, but you are in fact looking at brushed Surrey alpaca. So this top skein is an undyed skein of Surrey, and this bottom skein is a dyed skein of Surrey that I dyed for a project I have coming up. I'm calling this Peacock Feathers, and it's really beautiful. It is not as lustrous as mohair. It's a more matte fiber, but it is so soft and delicate and supple. This is what I'm using in my Magnolia Bloom sweater here. It gives, now I'm pairing it with a 100% merino DK single, but you can see that really lovely halo that it gives to the overall fabric, and it's beautiful, it's sumptuous and buttery and gorgeous, and I love it. This, what's great about it is it's readily available. You can probably find a Surrey option from whatever yarn company you're shopping from who also carries mohair. From my experience, I find that they do tend to have a Surrey option as well. I know for my business fiber for the people, I carry both a mohair and a Surrey yarn in my shop. And I feature them both regularly because there are folks who can't wear mohair, but they can definitely wear Surrey, and it's great to have the available option. So Surrey alpaca is lovely. It's a little less expensive, 10 to 15% less expensive per skein than the mohair counterpart. However, the weight of the yarn, and I feel like people go back and forth on this, but I'm gonna tell you right here, and you can take this to the bank. This is going to work up heavier than mohair. So if you have a pattern that calls for a mohair and a fingering weight yarn in order to achieve a DK weight overall, Surrey's not going to do the same thing for you as the mohair is. You're going to need to accommodate for the fact that Surrey almost borders on a fingering weight, and in some cases, depending on where you're purchasing it, almost a sport weight yarn. So when you're pairing that with a fingering weight yarn, your gauge is definitely going to be different, and you need to take that into consideration. However, this is an absolutely worthy competitor in the grand scheme of floofy yarn. It's lovely. It's just a great way to add really delicate, sumptuous floof to your project and to save a little bit of money in the process. Again, like I said, it's about 10 to 15% less per skein than mohair. Another option to get that really lovely floof on a budget is to seek out blown yarns or chainette yarns. This is a really interesting construction of yarn that provides you with a variety of weights, and the way that it's constructed provides a natural floof without having to add any additional yarn, and I think that that's so cool. So a chainette yarn or a blown yarn looks like this. This is by the company Assayer. This is EcoSoft. It consists of 54% alpaca and 56% alpaca and 44% organic cotton. And I'm not sure if you can see here, but the construction of the yarn is such that there is a cotton chain creating almost like a really narrow tube. And within that cotton chained tube, fiber is blown in to create this almost like netting with really floofy fiber blown into the netting, and that's your yarn essentially. It makes for a super lightweight yarn. This ball of yarn is incredibly lightweight for how much yardage you get here, and that's because the construction is just so light. But because it's not very dense, you really don't have a lot of material here, and that's going to help keep the price down. Now, another reason why this is going to contribute to a more budget-friendly project is because you don't have to pair mohair with this in order to get the halo. So you're really only purchasing one kind of yarn to achieve the halo that would otherwise be achieved using a standard, base yarn in a wool paired with a mohair or a Surrey. So you really only need to buy one type of yarn, and that's a huge bonus. Find a blown yarn or a chainette yarn that's going to give you this really lovely halo, purchase the yardage that you need, and just watch how, because you're only purchasing one type of yarn, you save tons of money. Okay, my last tip for you is to look for yarns that are naturally hairy. And just like in the case of the chainette and blown yarn, allow you to purchase the yarn that you need without having to think of doubling up quantities in order to get that halo. Now, I will add a little bit of a note here that most of these yarns that tend to be naturally hairy are not going to be as soft as a fabric that you would create with Surrey or Mohair. But if you don't have sensitivity to hairy yarns and you're okay with yarns being a little on the rustic side, these are a really great option for you, and they tend to be a little bit more budget friendly per 100 grams or 50 grams of yarn. And an example of that would be Istex Plötulopi. So this is unspun Icelandic wool yarn. You may be familiar with this if you've been watching folks talk about, knitting on podcasts lately, because it's all the rage. But you can see by looking at this, the really long hairs that are kind of emanating from the fiber, and that's the halo, and it's really lovely. And in fact, this yarn is what I have on here underneath a strand of mohair. So what's giving this that beautiful heathered look is a colored hand-dyed strand of mohair, which is my kick drum colorway by Fiber for the People, over the top of Plötulopi yarn. Ultimately, much of the halo that you see here is because of the Plötulopi. It gives a really nice natural halo, and the price of Plötulopi, which clocks in at I would say it's a heavy DK to a light worsted, is $10 per 100 grams. And that's a big deal because in this 100 gram plate of yarn, you're getting about 328 yards. So $10 per 328 yards is a really nice way to provide yourself with a nice halo in your fabric without breaking the bank. Now, chances are, if you are going to knit with just Plötulopi, you might want to double it up. Because it is an unspun yarn, it tends to be rather delicate when knit alone. You can absolutely knit with it alone, or you can pair it with a mohair if the budget thing isn't really an issue. But if you are going to knit with just Plötulopi, doubling it up to create your ultimate fabric is a really nice way to ensure the most resilience out of your fabric. However, you can definitely knit with this alone, and it really does provide you with a lovely halo. I mean, gosh, look at how beautiful that is, and rustic. So that is an option. Another option similar to this, and this is Swedish wool, comes to us from Nutiden. I can't pronounce the name. I want to say it's Oner. I'll pop it up so you can see, but this yarn is called Nutiden. It is Swedish wool. It is much the same as Plötulopi in that it is unspun. However, this clocks in at a light sport weight when you knit with it. Some people say that it's more of a lace weight, and I beg to differ. I think that when you knit with this, it definitely knits up into a sport weight, and if you knit with it double, you're going to be getting a little bit of a heavier DK weight yarn, and it will also provide you with a really nice halo as well. So you can see that here. This is Nutiden yarn. You can see the lovely hairy halo, and it's really, really pretty. This goes for roughly the same price as Plötulopi per 100 grams. The only thing about Nutiden is you really got to be paying attention when they have their shop updates. You can try finding it in D-stashes, but I find that it's impossible to find people getting rid of it because it is so coveted. Follow their Instagram, sign up for their newsletter, because that's really the best way to stay in tune with when they have their shop updates. But it is a really good way to save some money on really nice yarn that gives you a really nice natural halo if you're okay with more rustic hairy yarns. The last option in this particular category is by Hillesvåg. Hillesvåg is a Norwegian yarn company, and they have a few different lines of yarn that I would include in this category, but for the sake of this video, because I actually have this one available to me, this is the Tinda line of Hillesvåg yarn. It is a really beautiful 2-ply construction sport weight Norwegian wool yarn, and it's beautifully hairy. It has a really lovely halo because of the long staple length of the sheep breed that's being used here. It's gorgeous. Also, the yarn kind of has a natural dark gray color or undertone. So all of the colors that are dyed over this have a really pretty gray undertone. It's lovely all around, but it does have that really pretty natural halo, and it's a beautiful option. Tinda runs about $14 US per 100 grams, and 100 grams is going to give you about 260 meters. So this is more on the mid-range budget option, but it is far less expensive than having to purchase a mohair to pair it with another yarn and buy essentially 2 different types of yarn that can almost double the price of your project if you could just buy one skein of yarn to take care of the job. Okay, as promised, I want to provide you with 5 budget-friendly options or lesser expensive options of that coveted 70-30 roughly mohair silk yarn. That is the sweet spot for mohair yarn, and that's primarily what you're seeing when you're seeing it used in projects from folks such as Petite Knit. These options just seem to be the most readily available and budget-friendly options. Now I'm comparing the price of each of these when it comes to how budget-friendly it is to a higher end market value skein of 50 grams of mohair silk yarn that you could get from an indie dyer or any other high-end yarn company. Those clock in anywhere from $30 to $34 and sometimes even more than that per 50 grams. So we're going to compare what I'm offering you here, or what I'm providing you here as an option, to that market value price. And the first option I'm giving you is by Filcolana, and this is the Tilia yarn. Tilia is roughly $24 per 50 grams. It's on the higher end of this budget-friendly list that I have here, but it is a fantastic mohair yarn. If you read the reviews, it gets great reviews. If you watch what people say about it here on YouTube and on Instagram, folks really love this yarn. It's relatively readily available. You can find it by doing a simple Google search, and I believe you can even find it on Amazon. My number 4 option is by the Hobby Yarn Company, and this is called Mayflower Super Kid Mohair, and you can find this at roughly $20 per 50 grams, a little bit less expensive than Tilia, but another great option. I read the reviews for this as I haven't used it personally, and it seems to get glowing reviews. Of course, there are folks who feel certain ways about it, but overall, this seems to be a really great option if you're looking for mohair silk on a budget. My third option is by Valley Yarns, which is the Webb's Yarn Store company. This is the Southampton line of yarn, and it also retails at $20 per 50 grams. The second option I have for you here is by Knit Picks, and this is their Aloft line. This is a 72% mohair, 28% silk line of yarn, and this also clocks in at $20 per 50 grams, and it's by Knit Picks, which if you're here in the United States and Canada, I believe is very readily available. And my number 1 here on the list for most budget friendly is by Drops, and it is the Kid Silk line of yarn. I had a hard time finding Drops generally speaking on the internet for, locally in the United States. I find that if you go to the Drops website to purchase the yarn, they send you off to different yarn retailers that are selling that yarn, and it retails for anywhere from $5.99 to $8.99 per donut or per 25 grams. However, I did happen to find it on Amazon in a giant range of colors. You do have to pay a little less than $5 per shipping, but it was $6 per 25 gram donut, which is $12 per 50 grams of yarn. And that is a really great price if you're shopping for proper 70-30 or thereabouts mohair to silk yarn on a strict budget. Well, there you have it, guys. Ways that you can attain that really pretty natural ethereal halo on a budget. It's always a pleasure doing the research and putting the information together for these videos, so thank you so much for taking the time. If you did take away any value from this video or enjoyed yourself at all, please don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Definitely subscribe for more content, and don't forget to click the bell icon so you can be notified anytime I upload new content here on the channel, which is twice a week, on Wednesdays for the Midweek Ramble and on Sundays for the Proper Knitting Podcast. Also, definitely sign up for the newsletter over at woolneedleshands.com, and if you would like to further support the channel, you can definitely check out the merch shop, where there's some really cute knitting related conversation starters over there that are worth checking out. I think you can actually see those down below the video here as well. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I will see you on Sunday for the next episode of the podcast. In the meantime, happy knitting, happy making, happy whatever it is that you're doing. Take care, be well, and I will see you soon. Bye.